Hey everyone, my name is Steve and I'm gonna quickly walk you through how to set up this amazing Bringer of Death by Clembert and take the sprite sheet and turn it into actual animations and flip hooks and start using it in your Unreal Engine project. Let's get into it. The three things that you will need for this project are obviously Unreal Engine. Then we will be using this PaperZD plugin by Critical Failure Studio. I'm going to include the link in the description below this video. And of course, you will need to get this amazing asset from itch.io. Also, link can be found down in the description. Once you download the asset, you will see that there is a bunch of folders and files in the zip file. And while this pack also includes the individual sprites, there is still a little bit of work that you need to do that we can actually do in bulk when working with the sprite sheets themselves. So I'm going to be working with the sprite sheets in this tutorial. You'll be able to pick either the default Bringer of Death, which, looks like this, or you'll be able to pick the one without effects. And the only difference is exactly what the title suggests, which is that one of them, the default one, has effects, whereas the other one has no effect. So for example, the attack is just the normal slash, whereas here there's also attack. Both are going to work for this tutorial, so I'm going to leave it totally up to you which one you pick. I'm going to go with the default one with effects. Once you decide which one to pick, I want you to drag it into your Unreal Engine project. So I'm going to be starting with a completely blank project. So either you can do that to start a new map, or you can follow along using your existing game. Both scenarios should be fine. How I usually organize my assets is that in the content folder, I'm going to create 2D assets folder, and then the one that's named like the asset that I'm currently working with, but this is totally up to you. I'm just going to really quickly rename this just simply to Bringer of Death. The first critical thing is to right click, go to Sprite Actions and apply Paper 2D texture settings. This is something that you need to do with almost every texture imported into Unreal Engine to ensure that it's displayed correctly. Let's now extract the sprites and the flipbooks. So I'm going to right click on this file, go to PaperZD Actions and click Extract Flipbook. We're presented with the entire sprite sheet, which has 8 rows, 8 columns, so 64 sprites in total. And if I navigate back to the itch.io page, we see that we have 8 frames related to idle animation, 8 frames related to walk, 10 related to attack, and 3 related to hurt, 10 death, 9 cast, 16 spell. I'm going to be interested in idle, walk, attack, and hurt in this tutorial. However, I'm going to demonstrate all the principles that you will need to potentially extract all the others if you need them as well. So first, I want you to navigate to the right-hand menu where you have the Flipbooks section, which already has one element pre-selected. That's the yellow rectangle that you see on the screen. So now if I would click extract, that would just give us the entire sprite sheet, which is not what we want. So first, we're gonna focus on the first row, which is the idle animation. So I'm first gonna open the naming, and I'm gonna delete the ending section of this, and I'm gonna type in idle. I'm gonna grab this whole underscore idle and I'm just gonna paste it into the sprite naming template, as well as the anim sequence naming template, which is gonna help us when working with the sprites, etc. later on. Next thing I want you to do is to go to the sprite option, where we will change the pivot mode to bottom center. This is something that's going to become obvious in a few moments, so I'm going to explain it later. And then finally, extraction. So here you need to define the cell width and cell height. Right now it's set to the default total width, total height, which gives us the entire spreadsheet, as I said, which is obviously not something we want. Sometimes the author is going to tell you the exact cell width and height at the asset page. However, unfortunately, I did not find this information, so we have to do a little bit of experimentation. To be more precise, we're not going to do any experimentation. We are actually going to do a little bit of math. So we know that this sprite sheet has 8 columns and 8 rows. So in order to get the cell width of each column, we can divide this by 8, by the number of columns. And cell height, we can also divide this by 8 because we have 8 rows. As you can see, this has neatly split the sprite sheet into individual cells. Unfortunately, there is one thing that we need to modify, and that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to extract the entire Flipbook directly from the sprite sheet, which is, you can see there is one sort of like dead pixel underneath each frame. It doesn't matter in which I go, there is always this one pixel. So we will need to get rid of this particular pixel. Which is thankfully relatively easy because we can simply say that the cell height is not 93, but 92. Unfortunately, as you can probably notice, if I do that, the first row works really well, but it starts going downhill starting from the second row. And then like in the 5th or 6th row, you can see that like a large portion of the legs is already missing. However, we can work around that. With this margin or sometimes with the spacing property. However, right now we're only focused on the first row, so we don't really need to worry about that. What we need to worry is to define how many cells we actually want to extract. So not all of these cells are related to the idle animation. In fact, only the first 8, as we just saw on the itch.io page recently. So either I could say that horizontally or number cells X, we would like to go with 8, which doesn't really change anything because if you leave it at the default 0, it just targets the entire row. So I'm going to leave it at 0. And number cells vertically is essentially asking us how many how many rows we want to extract. So I'm going to type in 1. And as you can see, it beautifully targets just the first row. All right, let's now do the very same thing for the walking animation, which is the second row. So if you want to practice, you can actually pause the video right now and just try it yourself. Otherwise, just let's follow along. So again, I'm going to go with naming, and I'm going to change this to walk. I'm going to copy this and paste it over to the other naming templates, just like before. Now we go to Sprite. Make sure to change the pivot mode to bottom center. And let's go to extraction, where again, we know now that this cell width is 140. And cell height, we know that we want to target 92 pixels, right? But again, now we run into the issue where suddenly we are actually losing some pixels from our cells, from our frames. So what we will change this time is that we will add a margin. So margin X is essentially margin horizontally. So, you know, essentially from the left, and margin Y is the margin vertically. So I'm going to type in this 1 extra pixel. As you can see, we created this little gap over here, which gets rid of this extra dead row of pixels. So that's actually what we want. Number cells horizontally, we still want the whole row. So I'm going to leave this as 0. And number cells Y vertically, we want, again, just 1 row. But now we're just targeting the first row. So obviously that's a mistake. And we essentially want to define here how many pixels we want to skip. So I'm going to type in 93 because that's skipping essentially the 92 pixels of the first row, and then the 1 extra pixel that we want to get rid of, that we already said previously that we're not interested in. So the second row is essentially going to start after 93 pixels. Let's now extract the attack animation. However, this is going to be the first slight challenge for us because the attack animation is actually 10 frames. So it's the entire third row. So all these 8 frames on the third row, and then these 2 frames on the fourth row. So we will need to do some extra work here, but we will be able to do it in no time. So I'm going to add additional element here. I'm going to, again, change the naming. This is still the same. Process attack. Grab this. paste it in the other naming templates. In Sprite, we change this to bottom center. And in extraction, we're going to say cell width 140, cell height 92 pixels, and we want one row. Even though I've said we still need these 2 extra frames, but we're going to get that in a second. And margin Y is still going to be 93, because again, that's the 92 pixels of the previous row plus the 1 extra. But we want to skip 2 rows, so I'm going to type in ×2, press enter, and it's going to do the calculation for us, which is 186. And as you can see, if I zoom in here, it's giving us this beautiful gap of this 1 pixel that we don't want, and it's skipping the first 2 rows. So that's awesome, but now we need the 2 frames from the 3rd row. So the beginning of the process is still the same. So I'm going to add a new element. Here I'm going to do the same naming. So again, attack. This is completely the same process. Sprite, again, bottom center. And extraction, again, the same process. 140 is the width. That's still the same. Height is still 92. However, here comes the first change. This time, we only want vertically to extract 2 cells, right? So as you can see, if I type in 2, it's just targeting the first 2 columns. And vertically, we want to extract 1 row. So right now we're obviously targeting the top left, but again, by adjusting the margin, 93 times, but this time we're skipping 3 rows, so times 3, enter, and it's beautifully targeting the first 2 frames of the 4th row. And now comes probably the trickiest animation that we're going to be extracting, which is the hurt animation, which are these 3 following frames. So they're sort of in the middle, not really at the beginning or at the end of anything. So it's the hardest to target them, but using this principle that we've just demonstrated, it's actually relatively easy. So again, if you want to practice this, try pausing this video. Otherwise, you can follow along with me. So naming, still the same process. I'm going to type in hurt, grab this, control, paste, paste. Sprite, still the same thing, pivot mode, bottom center, and extraction, still 140 width, still 92 height. This time, horizontally, we want to extract 3 frames, vertically still just 1. However, here, we will need to work with the margin a little bit. So first, I'm going to fill in the margin Y, which we are already familiar with, which is 93 times 3, right? So now we're targeting the first 3 frames in the 4th row. But by adjusting the margin X, which we need to take the cell width, which is 140, as we know, and we need to skip the first 2 frames. So I'm going to do ×2. Press enter, and now we're beautifully targeting the next 3 frames of the hurt animation. And that's all I'm going to extract from this sprite sheet, but using what we have just demonstrated, you can very easily extract everything else. So if you need any of these spell casts or anything like that, feel free to do that. If you struggle with anything, just write me in the comment section. I'm more than happy to help. But again, if you use the principles that we've just shown, it should be super easy. The only thing left to do is to press extract. It just takes a few seconds. And as you can see, we have a bunch of new files. We have the flipbooks starting with FB something, and then we have all the sprites starting with S_. So if I hover, for example, over the walk flipbook, you can see that the animation essentially works really nice. Same for idle, same for hurt, even though it's just 3 frames, so it's kind of too quick. But we have 2 animations related to attack. Unfortunately, I don't think there is a way to simply merge flipbooks, so I'm just going to delete them. And I'm going to use the attack sprites that we have generated, starting with bringer of death underscore attack 0 all the way to bringer of death underscore attack 9. So that's 10 sprites in total. I'm going to select them all, right click, sprite actions, create flipbook. Super easy. We're going to name it FB underscore bringer of death underscore attack. Enter. And as you can see, now we have the complete animation for the bringer of death. However, there is still a little bit of work that we need to do, which I'm going to demonstrate right now. For example, if I drag and drop this flipbook into the world, you can already probably see that we will need to work with this pivot point over here. The reason is that because it's on the side and not centered, then if you want to flip this flipbook, maybe you want the character to be facing the other direction. So I'm going to simulate that with changing the rotation property over here. I'm going to flip it by 180 degrees to face the other direction. It is going to face the other direction, but it's sort of going to teleport because it's using this pivot point literally as, the pivot point. It's turning around it. In order to prevent this, we will need to make sure that this pivot point is centered in the middle of the character. Now, this is done at the level of individual sprites, but there are some bulk actions that we can take. So first, I'm going to select every single sprite of all the animations that we have exported so far, starting from attack all the way to walk. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to Asset Actions, Edit Selection in Property Matrix. If you check out the pivot mode, you can see that it's set to bottom center, which we've set up when we were extracting the flipbooks, which is actually correct. But now I want you to change it to custom. And just save everything and go back. The reason we did it in bulk is because we will be working with the pivots and we will be changing everything to custom. So we saved ourselves quite a few clicks. So if you open really any of the sprites, it doesn't really matter which one, you can go to Edit Source Region, and this essentially shows you the entire sprite sheet and, the frames around the sprites that we have generated. And we can use this to easily navigate between all these different sprites instead of having to sort of go to the content drawer and find which sprite we already worked with and stuff like that. The pivot point, as you can see, has certain coordinates, and all these coordinates for all these sprites is related to the upper left corner of the entire sprite sheet. So as you can see, as I'm going sort of further away from the upper left corner, both the X and Y is increasing. Unfortunately, there is no automatic way to do this in bulk at once, but we can sort of use a little bit of math to make it easier for us. So the first thing we need to do is go to the view and find the first location for the centered pivot point. Afterwards, we're going to use maths to just be a little bit quicker about it. You can theoretically play around with this, experiment a little bit. I found out through experimentation that the current center point for the topmost sprite, which is the first frame of the idle animation, is 106. So if you go to the very first sprite, to the idle 0, which is the first frame of the idle animation, and you go to view and change this to 106, that's when your sprite is going to get centered. Now I want you to go back to Edit Source Region, and we're going to be working from this view just to be a little bit quicker. So we can now use the fact that we know how wide the cell is. If you remember, we figured out that each frame is 140 pixels wide. So what we can easily do is we can grab this number, 106, go to the second frame of the idle animation, paste it here in the X property, and do plus 140. If I press enter, it's going to do the calculation for me automatically. I can go back to the view and I can see that it's centered as well without me having to fiddle around with, finding the right spot. which would be unreliable anyways. So let's now do this with all the frames in the first row, which are related to the idle animation. So again, I'm going to grab the result of the X property, Control C, go to the third one, paste it in the X, plus 140. It's going to give us 386. Again, Control C, go to the fourth one, paste, plus 140. It's a little bit repetitive now. Control C, go to the next one, paste, plus 140. And you literally do this exact same thing all the way to the end of the first row. So again, I'm going to grab this, Control C, go to the next frame, plus 140, grab this, go to the final cell or final frame, plus 140. And that now means that all of our frames for the idle animation are centered. You can check it easily by going to the view and seeing that even the final frame is perfectly centered. And now, thankfully, we know that the first column center, because if I zoom in, you see that the characters are lined up very nicely. So kudos to the artist, actually. So you can easily reuse the value from the first row and just paste it over to the other rows. But it just has to be the same frame, you know, in the same column, otherwise it wouldn't work. So now if I go to the first frame of the walk animation, I remember that it's 106, that's the correct value. But now I don't have to even go here and like do all the maths in the second column. I can just go to the second column in the first row where we've already established the correct value, 246. I can copy that and go to the second row and just paste it in. And go to the third row and just paste it into the X property. And go to the fourth row, paste it in, right? So we don't even need to do the math because we already know where the pivot point should be. So again, same thing in the third row. I'm just going to grab the X value. I'm going to go to the second row, paste it, third row, paste it, fourth row, paste it. And I'm just going to keep doing this for all of the remaining cells. Once you're done with the last column, you can just save everything and you should be able to now verify. So for example, you know, if I go back to our level, I can see that the walking animation is already fixed, which is perfect. I can like rotate the character and you can see that I can rotate it perfectly along the center axis without, you know, the bringer of death sort of teleporting anywhere. But we can also, and we should also check all the others because there is a chance that I have actually made a mistake. And I can already see that there is something wrong with the attack animation. So let's see, the idle one seems fine. Hurt seems also fine, even though the animation itself is a little bit jerky because obviously it's a short animation. But if I drag and drop the attack one, I can already see there is some sort of an issue with some of the frames. So let's investigate. You can literally open any sprite. So I'm going to go, for example, to this attack one. And I'm going to go to edit source region. And I'm just going to double check the values for the pivot point. Okay, and I can already see the issue. So I forgot to copy and paste the 106 value from the first column. So I'm just going to paste this into the X value. And if I save, that probably should be everything. Yes, so it was just a human error. And that's it. So congratulations on following along. It has been a little bit of a manual, repetitive work, I gotta admit. Hopefully somebody's gonna come up with a plugin for Unreal Engine to automate some of this work. In the meantime, this is how you can do it. Let me know in the comment section if everything was clear. If not, I'm more than happy to make another video clarifying some of the details. And yeah, if you like this tutorial, make sure to hit that subscribe because I'm making many tutorials on a weekly basis, especially focused currently on 2D games in Unreal Engine. And I would love to have you along on the journey. Also, there is a Discord down in the description below this video, so if you want to come there and showcase the game that you're working on, I would be very, very happy to have a look and have you in the community. All right, that's it from me. Have a good one. Bye.